Undead Unluck is praised for its wholesomeness, despite it being Dark Souls levels of depressing. Seriously, the characters in this manga get punished just for being alive. Have some parents you like? Yeah, you're the reason they died. Wanna just mind your own business? Sorry, the universe has other ideas. So what could possibly be optimistic about a story this tragic? Well, in Undead Unluck, the characters say F you to the universe and make their own fate. And honestly, that's pretty metal. The premise of Undead Unluck is pretty straightforward. In Undead Unluck, the universe is kind of like that one roommate who thinks they're your mom. It has rules. Rules like seasons, burn, galaxy. The rules are the things that God creates that make the universe work the way it does. So, for example, one of the rules is language. Pretty self-intuitive. With language, that means everyone speaks different languages. But if you take that rule away, then suddenly there's no language barrier and everyone speaks English. I know, right? Go figure. Anyway, that's one half of the premise. The other half is the negators, and this is sort of the bread and butter of Undead Unluck. See, the negators are randomly given abilities that negate a certain rule or concept. There's unavoidable, untruth, unchange. Those are just a few, but you get the idea. Naturally, this leads to a bunch of crazy characters, like a robot cyclops and a mad lad martial artist that'll diss you in Chinese. It also leads to crazy battles where characters blow up entire armadas just by looking at them, and this dude who literally uses his own fingers as bullets. That's Andy, one of the main characters, but we'll get back to him later in the video. Now, remember how I said these abilities are given randomly? Well, these abilities aren't something you're necessarily born with. You could be normal for 15 years, be totally minding your own business, and suddenly this ability activates without you even knowing. It is the source of every character's tragic backstory, and usually leads them to cause the death of everyone they know and love. And this is how we're introduced to one of Undead Unluck's main characters, Fuko. But just before we get into that, if you're enjoying the video so far, then make sure to hit that like button so we can help spread it to everyone else. Now, like I was saying, Fuko is one of the negators, and her ability is Unluck. I know that's not technically a word, but remember, this is anime logic. Anyway, with Unluck, Fuko negates the luck of anyone she comes into contact with. It's a little more nuanced than that, but that's the basic idea. So in Fuko's case, her ability activated right away when she was saying bye to her parents right before they got on a plane. And from there, I'm sure you can figure out the rest. Yeah, wasn't exactly kidding when I said these characters get punished just for existing. Fuko was just vibing, and suddenly the universe decides her fate. And that fate completely ruins Fuko's life. Once she realizes what happened to her parents, that's it. Fuko completely closes herself off to avoid ever coming into contact with anyone, which should definitely hit home considering the pandemic wasn't too long ago. It robbed her of everything. She didn't have parents to look up to, she couldn't go to school like the other kids. All she could do was read manga. And don't get me wrong, I love manga, but making it your entire life isn't exactly living. So when you're surviving, but you're not really living, eventually you start to wonder, what's the point? Why should I even get out of bed anymore? These are the questions that hit Fuko, and when we meet her, she decides that finishing her favorite manga is the last thing she's ever gonna do. Thankfully, Andy steps in and saves her. Well, save isn't the right word given the very, admittedly, uncomfortable context. However, he does change her mind. But that still doesn't answer our question. If your life sucks, if you can't name a single person who even remotely cares about you, if you feel like the universe has it out against you, what is the point? How can you possibly make your life worth living? Well, Undead Unluck essentially gives you two answers to this question. The first is to go out and share your struggles. When you get depressed, and I mean really depressed, you tend to feel like it's only happening to you. You know, that feeling of like, ugh, why me? That also tends to isolate you from everyone else. And it's exactly what happens to another negator named Shikara. Like I said, Andy ends up saving Fuko, and the two of them eventually join the team of negators known as the Union. After that, they're sent on a mission to save Chikara. It's a wacky cruise ship adventure involving gangsters and an evil version of Union called Under. Fortunately, Andy and Fuko are able to save Chikara, but they give him the choice of whether he wants to join Union. Chikara hasn't really been able to live a normal life up until this point, so they give him a week to think things over. When they go to see him a week later, Chikara explains to Andy and Fuko how he killed his parents, how the three of them were just grocery shopping, and Chikara even offered to carry the bags for his parents. But after his parents are unable to dodge the incoming traffic, Chikara realizes that it was all his fault. His ability Unmove caused his parents to get hit by traffic. And with her dying breath, Chikara's mother tells him to be someone who can help others. With a mission with no real meaning and nothing but regret, Chikara was lost. Part of him wondered what the point of living was, but he knew his parents would want him to keep living. And for a while, he thought this was how he could make up for what he had done. But then he meets Andy and Fuko and realizes he was wrong. When Andy and Fuko fought the bad guys, Chikara actually uses his ability to help them. After this, he decides it's not enough to just live for the sake of living while hiding part of who he is. To make amends, Chikara decides to use his ability to save even more people and to work with Andy and Fuko, and all of the other members of Union who are just like him. And this is how you can make your life meaningful by sharing your struggle. Instead of just living in misery, you can share your pain with the people around you who are going through their own problems. If you're gonna struggle, why not struggle with people who can support you? And like Chikara, you might even be able to use that struggle to add value to someone else's life. But what if you don't know how? What if instead of Chikara, you're like Tatiana? You're completely alone, you're too young to help anyone, and it seems like nobody cares about you. Well, as unrealistic as it might seem in the moment, there's always someone that cares about you. In Tatiana's case, this is where Billy comes in. And at this point, I'd like to have Townzie, the editor for this video, explain in his own words how Billy is able to help Tatiana.
Yo, how y'all doing? I'm new to this establishment, Townzie. I'm the mayor. Now, for full disclosure, Billy, just about the coldest dude in this manga. I don't know what it is about dudes named Billy, but somehow they always end up being total badasses. You know what I'm saying? I know you've heard the phrase. He cool, always wearing those sunglasses, the slick back hair, the rock star. Listen. It's the cool dad you always wanted, especially fortunately for Tatiana. That's exactly what happened on her 5th birthday. She had this ability that activates and accidentally kills her parents. I don't know why, but this author loves killing parents and best friends like Araki loves killing dogs. Anyways, Tatiana is left all by herself, eventually gets auctioned off by the mafia as a freak. And then this when Billy comes in and saves her, but Tatiana don't want to be saved. Instead, Tatiana just wants to be back with her parents. So what does Billy do? He go from badass mode, Billy badass mode, kindergarten cop mode, straight back and forth, 180, and gives Tatiana these goofy cake bar looking things that he made just for her, just cause she knew she could only eat food through a tube because of her ability. Can't touch anything. Then he takes her back to the Union, does everything to make sure she feels at home, straight daddy mode. As a result, Billy changes Tatiana's life completely. Before she met Billy, her ability made Tatiana feel like she didn't even deserve to live. But now, because Billy treated her like she was somebody special, Tatiana finds herself wanting to use her ability on her own terms, not God's.
As you can see, Billy shows us the flip side of sharing your struggles. Sometimes you're like Chikara and you have this pain, this experience that you can use to connect with others. But sometimes your life is so tragic and you feel so powerless. You feel like you don't even deserve to have friends. And that's when you just have to be open. Instead of hiding in a ball, go out and be open to new people. Because even if 99 people walk right past you, there's always that 100th person. That Billy, that random person that you thought you'd never meet that suddenly makes you feel like you matter. And this is partly why Undead Unluck is so wholesome. Despite all the tragedy, all the crazy shit that ruins people's lives, the characters eventually find someone to share their struggles with. It might seem overly optimistic, but when you feel like the universe has it out for you, why not? If the universe is gonna decide you should be miserable, why not decide for yourself that you're gonna be hopeful? And that gets into the other answer. When the characters in Undead Unluck start asking themselves why bother, the first answer is to share your struggle. The second answer is to make your fate. Earlier in the video, I said that negators are the bread and butter of Undead Unluck. And yeah, part of it is because they represent the unique power system and make for bizarre characters. But a lot of it is because they set the tone for the story. And nobody does this better than Andy and Fuko. When we meet Andy, he explains that he's undead. With his ability, his body will always regenerate, and it's basically impossible for him to die. While it does make for a really cool set of abilities where Andy's basically using every part of his body as a weapon, it's also a curse. Although he regenerates, Andy still feels the agonizing pain of each attack and every death. And while the people around him eventually grow old, Andy is forced to walk the earth staying exactly the same, never aging, never approaching some sort of finality. But this is why Andy is so charismatic. God gave Andy this ability, and even Andy views it more as a curse than a blessing. But instead of accepting his fate of never being able to die, he chooses to keep looking for that one thing that will finally overpower his curse. Andy gives God the finger and replaces God's plans with his own. And this is how Andy comes to start traveling alongside Fuko. When he learns about her powers, Andy realizes that Fuko's unluck might just be the solution to his problem. If he can get a big enough stroke of unluck, Andy might just find the death he's looking for. Now, at first, poor Fuko is like, dude, I don't even know you, can you just put some pants on? But when they're attacked by a group of bad guys and Andy chooses to turn himself in to protect her, Fuko decides to use her unluck to protect Andy. What turns out to be unlucky for the bad guys actually ends up as a stroke of good luck for Andy and Fuko. And this is the best representation of Undead Unluck's optimism. Because Fuko takes her unluck, she takes the random indifference of the universe, and uses it how she wants, to protect what she cares about. Despite the fate God handed her, and despite how random and meaningless the world seems, Fuko learns to take that randomness and use it to give her life meaning. So like Andy, Fuko is able to overcome tragedy by making her own fate. And that's how Undead Unluck's two main characters are able to make the meaningless meaningful. When I said Undead Unluck is optimistic despite how tragic it can be, it's because of how the characters choose to be optimistic in spite of their tragedies. And I know this can at times lead to the toxic mentality of, well, you decide whether you want to be depressed. But the reality is that you don't. You don't choose to be born into the world, and you don't decide to be born the way you are. It's completely random. And it's this cruel randomness of the universe that Undead Unluck directly addresses. With each negator, it's always random what happens to them. They don't choose to get their abilities, and they don't do anything to deserve what happens to them. But the universe still hands them their fate. With no rational explanation behind their fate, the struggles they have to go through feel meaningless. And whenever I read about these struggles, I'm always reminded of Albert Camus' myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus is cursed by the gods to roll a stone up a mountain. When he eventually reaches the top, the stone always rolls back down and he has to do it all over again. It's a meaningless struggle, but Camus claims we can find meaning in the struggle itself. For a more recent take on this, just look at Rolling Stone in JoJo's Part 5. Rolling Stone shows the characters their fate, but despite it, they find meaning in the struggle that leads them to that fate. Like Sisyphus, they own their stone. And this is why people love Undead Unluck and its characters. When it seems like they're destined to be alone, they take that pain and use it to support others. When the universe feels random and empty, they fill that void with their own meaning. In a world where you constantly find yourself asking what's the point, it's an incredibly uplifting story that reminds you that you always matter to someone, especially yourself. And that is exactly why you should read Undead Unluck. Before I close out the video, I want to give a big shout out to my guy Townzie. He was just as excited about this video as me, probably more if I'm being honest. So if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to thank him by checking out his channel linked in the description. Now, I know there's a lot we probably missed, so at this point I'd like to hear what you think. What do you find appealing about Undead Unluck? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And if you'd like another discussion like this one, then make sure to check out my recent video on JJK. In it, Broken Ronin and I discuss why animes should be carried by fights. You can find that video in the playlist linked right here. Again, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.